in session. I'll call the meeting to order. The Public Works Committee meeting will meet at 6 p.m. and in fact it's actually 6:15 p.m. on Tuesday, March 3rd, 2020 in the first floor conference room at City Hall at 444 West Grand Avenue, Wisconsin Rapids, Wisconsin. I'll introduce myself. I'm Chairperson Pat Kubishak.
Tom Rail, member of the committee.
Scott Kellogg, alderperson.
Tim Zager, Express Recycling.
Joe Terry, Director of Public Works.
And I'm Doug Virginski, Alderman Committee member.
Dennis Pollock, citizen.
Wonderful. We'll go to item number 2, review and consider a revision to the Public Works Special Assessment Process and Procedures. And we just briefly talked about this at the previous Finance Committee meeting. So, Mr. Terry, you had passed out a handout. I think all of us in attendance had looked at that, except maybe
Denny.
Mr. Pollock.
I have an extra here.
One for Denny then?
Sure.
You got one. I thought I had an extra.
Thank you.
So what this is ultimately stemming from a referral by Mr. Rayom. So, Mr. Rayom, if you want to start.
Then probably let Joe take over after that, but my thoughts have been for a long time of if there's a different way that we can assess people to come up with a plan to do that. It's been, over the years, when people got their assessments and that, they came in. I'll use the word complain, that really isn't maybe the right word to use, but obviously people do when they see what that bill is. There's hearings that go on and what to lead up to it, and then when that final bill comes, it's a shock, because it is quite expensive, and it's so is there a different way to do it? And I turned in a referral again a couple months ago or 3 months ago, whatever, that we look at it, and I think this is probably about the farthest we've gotten on it and ever. That engineering has come back with a draft of things to possibly look at, and I think that it may be good that we just go over, unless there's other comments first, but I think just to go over with Mr. Terry what the draft is from engineering, and see if that's what we want to go, that route to go, or things to add or subtract from or whatever, to see if there is. But I'd like that somehow come up, give direction to proceed with something, to look at least that if there is a different option, to at least, to put the thing into motion. So I would think, unless there's somebody else, that maybe go to Joe and let him go over what this is that they came up with.
Sure, and unless there's a desire to go into detail, I'll keep it a bit brief because I think everybody was here and the previous meeting was recorded. But in summary, this scope is to perform a study that will satisfy the council's desire to look into options, costs, different ideas related to construction project costs that include special assessments, but may include some other options as well. May include options such as vehicle registration fees, payment in lieu of taxes from the wastewater utility, a separate transportation utility, property taxes, and evaluating the existing special assessment program. Reviewing the pros and cons of all of them, what some of the costs and ramifications are from the finance department for the different ways of generating revenue for construction projects, and compare and contrast what other municipalities are doing and what some of the common practices are related to funding for these types of projects. We're proposing that the deliverables include a concise electronic report with attachments to all of the resources presented. The draft table of contents would include an introduction and background with the scope of the study, some details on our existing special assessment program, and what it generates. We would have tables that include a number of recent projects and, randomly pick a handful of different properties that were assessed, and we can identify what their assessments were based on the type of project. Look at existing historical and future revenues for all of the different types of fundraising options. Look at comparisons of each, including the aforementioned variables. Some recommendations as far as maybe how the council may score some things. So some recommendations in determining, on making a determination, and an appendix that would contain all of the resources sourced for the study. The objective here is to try to provide information so that the council can do a full review of the current process and evolve it into maybe a new process, maybe a combination of assessments and different things, but to get a better understanding of the city's current ordinance, what we're doing, and what some options are in lieu of what we're currently doing. And if the committee feels that this is the scope that you'd like us to work on, we would begin that analysis right away. If there's things that you'd like us to change in this scope, just let us know what those are so that we can make sure that the report that we end up with it contains the data that you're looking for and the information that you desire.
That's fine with me unless somebody has something to change on this sheet here, but I think
Yeah, like I mentioned, I'd like to know what the city's goals are, for one thing. Number two, how long it's going to take you to get this report ready and submitted to the committee.
Okay, so the city's standards are included in a different ordinance.
That's the other thing.
Do we want to, because there's two different issues. One is, how does the city select projects and decide what a project looks like? Whether the street is a certain width. We have an ordinance, I believe, that details for the residential,
Commercial.
arterial, and and the different, and connecting highways, the different cross sections for design standards. Where, in general, where sidewalks located and isn't, that's a different ordinance that describes how we select projects, and this describes how we pay for projects. And so it's certainly appropriate to do both. I think to put it all in one would would significantly increase the amount of work to get a result. But if that's what the council wants.
I think, Bud, we got two different things here. I think the second thing, what you're kind of looking for in terms of what we want to do to choose streets, or at least have some type of an option with that, that's more on a legislative side, not necessarily excluding our experts, but we take your recommendation.
Right.
And then we ultimately decide if we have enough money to do certain streets, and then if we don't, we say we can't do these certain projects. So I think that we can address that at another at another time, or concurrently, but if we put it in here, it might cause this to take a lot longer. Does that make sense?
Well, I would like to see sidewalks put into one ordinance. You got information regarding sidewalks in 2.14. You got it in 670703, and it's in 456. And, you know, there's about 4 or 5 different places where you get information regarding sidewalks, funding, location, all that stuff. I would like to see it one place so that you go here and you got all the information you need.
We could potentially create a summary document, but the reason it's in different ordinances is because those ordinances, there are some ordinances specific to use of the right-of-way. And then there's other ordinances that are specific to, design standards. There's an ordinance specific to snow removal and the plowing of sidewalks, right? So related to sidewalks, they're in different ordinances because those ordinances are specific to that function of the asset. So we could potentially create a resource that describes all the locations to find that, but I think it would be really challenging, and we could talk to our city attorney to try to reorganize the ordinance, the code, in a way that everything related to streets is in one chapter when it isn't. I mean, right now, it codified, it doesn't work that way. Because like parking is in a chapter that's different than street design, and they're spread out for various reasons to stay codified and consistent with the state statutes and standards. I don't know if that makes sense.
I just don't think that's that difficult.
Okay.
I really don't. And I think it would be simple. Anybody wanting that information will only have to go to one place and get it.
Yeah, I think it would be beneficial, just on the note on sidewalks as it relates to location. I think the city could benefit greatly by having a policy that, maybe it was just reviewed. Maybe a referral is to review the policy on sidewalk placement and location. Because as it relates to the engineering department, if they're designing 2 years out and they're operating off of certain assumptions, or they're, I don't assume that they would be doing that, but I think having a real defensible rationale for where sidewalks are installed should occur. And I think the ordinance does describe that today already, but perhaps to revise and to have everyone understand it. I think as it relates to financing them, that'll be included in this scope, if I'm not mistaken, as I read it previously.
Well, and I think
Like the assessments of like who pays for sidewalks, right? Because I think part of the issue is not so much they're putting a sidewalk in front of my house, it's I got to pay for 100% of it. I mean, that's a burden that's extreme for people that have never had that burden.
But Alder Verchinsky's question,
he's got a different statement, but I wanted to pull on that sidewalk piece.
Right, was related to having everything.
Because as I understood a goal, as you were pointing out about goals, I think that goal, if it's sidewalk related or whatever, yeah, that I would agree. We don't want to include it in the scope of this project, but I think that's an additional item that I'm hearing the community want to discuss, and I think the committee at some level, at some point in the future, should review that policy. If, to the extent that it defines this or not, I haven't looked at it personally myself in a while.
Yeah, I think, I think the funding part that we have to, it's, to me, should stand alone. If sidewalks are where they're going to be, or what, if they're going to be put in, or what there is, it is defined already in ordinances and that, and I guess we can look at the different ones that there are. If there's a way to put them all together, that'd be one. That's one thing, but I know there's some that don't want sidewalks at all. I know there's some that like sidewalks. Some would, a combination of where it should be or shouldn't be. But that's not part of what this referral is. The referral is how it's paid for. And that's, I think, to stick with that, and I think to look at where sidewalks are or whatever, if there's a change that is desired or to modify the ordinance or something, that should probably be a referral to look at that differently. But the paying part would be there. So, you know, that where sidewalks or curb and gutter and the projects themselves, it could, you know, can be an issue that is studied, how a project is determined one over the other. If the council wants to look at that as a whole, the committee wants to look at that, you know, how it's totally reviewed or gone over, how they're selected, that's fine, but I think that's separate from how it's paid for. Paid for is the issue. You know, that when the citizens are upset that are affected by it, that it's the payment of it. They complain about having a sidewalk maybe put in, but the biggest issue with that is how it's paid for. So that's why I think it's to me, it should stay as a separate issue. But let's figure out how it's going to be paid for, and then if we want to debate and argue about it, or however, or come up with a solution of where it's put in, that's there. But then that becomes the rule, or is the rule. But how it's paid for, that would be there then too. You know, this is to look at, can it be changed from what we're doing? And I think there's things here to look at, and as Joe has said, that maybe in a few months that they may be able to come back to something, you know. It'd have to go through a committee process and whatnot then too, to, you know, and then the council to approve some change if there is to be a change. And it's to look at all of it. You know, you know, with that is how much assessments are there? I mean, what are the total amount of assessments in a year? That, you know, how does that transfer out over a month? You know, if it is to be looked at amongst the whole entire city, or is it to be changed? You know, so I think there's a lot of things to weigh in, and that's why I think that the paying part should stay by itself.
I would just like to say, I know there's concern about how to rectify it if the people who have been charged in the past, if something were to change going forward. And I think, because I've heard that from a number of people that I've talked to in this process, and I think that I just want it to be known that I don't think that that's a reason to not change it, is because we can't figure out, you know, how to, you can't really start or stop 60 years of people paying it in the past. So how do we move forward has to be the focus, and not how are we going to satisfy the people that already paid it. Because that's always, you're never going to make everybody happy, right? So not that I mean, if there's a way to help those people, that'd be great. But I don't, that can't be a reason not to do something.
Correct. That may be part of the discussion, but if it is to be changed, that isn't necessarily the reason not to change something.
Right.
I mean, this is going on and going on and going on.
So, I mean, where would you start?
So you know, so it may be part of the discussion, but it shouldn't be the reason to not do something if there is a way to change it. So.
Well, I think the most difficult portion of this is going to be the funding, of course. And the second is what criteria has to be met to justify the installation of a sidewalk. You know, is it going to be 10 people a day walking down the sidewalk, or is it going to be 100?
But that's why that's not part of this. To me, that's why that stays separate from how it's paid for.
Yeah.
That's a different discussion of where and when it's put in. That should be a different discussion.
Well, now it says that
That's
they
a
would
different-
be installed around school.
That's a different discussion though, is how it's paid for, is what this, the referral is how it's paid for.
Well,
If you want to turn a different referral, turn in a different referral.
To kind of bring it
I'm going to
back.
stick with referral is, and that's how it's paid for.
We'll go with that, Tom. To bring it back, Tom is correct that that's a different item. Not that we can't talk about it, but what we're looking at is basically who's going to pay for it or how it's going to pay for it right now. Now, that's one thing that I can definitely do. I can put it either on the referral list or I can put it on next month's agenda to actually discuss moving forward, what we want to do with deciding on sidewalks, and that's definitely a legislative issue. You know, we don't necessarily need that much research and everything. I mean, we can arbitrarily decide if we want to put sidewalks within 200 feet of a school, but, I mean, that's the committee's
Right, so you can
decision.
see what our ordinances are, so we know what we're talking about. To make
Correct.
sure we got the right information in front of us of what we're
Correct,
talking
but
about.
that could be a separate thing, and we can absolutely do that at any time. But I think kind of looking at what we've specifically got on this, and Tom is accurate, it's really about a study in terms of what we want to do, basically where's the money going to come from? Right, does that make sense with that, for this particular issue? But I do agree with you, there is, it's still open up in the air, you know, whether, you know, who gets a sidewalk. Exactly, because for example, like in front of my house, I live in a corner lot, and the neighbor has got sidewalk and it was dead-ended right at my property line, whether I want sidewalk or not. If it continued through to the next street, it wouldn't do any good because there's no sidewalk coming, you know, to that street. So then, how is sidewalks actually kind of determined? Do we know, do we not know? I know Mr. Terry knows because he knows the ordinance, but I can't, you know, off the top of my head, know anything about what is sidewalk procedure, but
No.
but
See what they come up with.
correct. And what I'll do is I'll put that on the agenda for next committee meeting. Does that sound fair?
That's fine.
Good.
Or we can wait until they come up with a recommendation.
Then what I'll do is I'll put it on the referral list so that we can always put it on.
Yeah, okay, all right, sounds good.
So then, Mr. Rayholm, do you have any? What is your feelings specifically about this?
I'm satisfied with what the draft here is. I'd move that we go along with, or recommend that we advance this to the council meeting, that to direct engineering to follow through on this.
So,
Motion by Rayholm, second by Brzezinski. Is there any further discussion? Anything? Nothing. All right, with that being said, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Nays,
I'm sorry, who seconded that?
Mr. Brzezinski. Motion on the floor, second, to approve this draft special assessment study was approved 3-0. We'll move on to item number 3. Review and consider approval of preliminary resolution declaring intent to levy special assessments for permanent street surfacing, concrete curb and gutter, defective sidewalk, concrete driveway approaches, and sanitary and water services for 18th Avenue South from Russell Street to West Grand Avenue.
So the 18th Avenue project has been in the capital improvement plan and is a project that there's need by the water utility. The water utilities made the ask, sanitary sewer wastewater utilities made the ask, and the street condition is deteriorated and needs to be replaced. The majority of the street was replaced in 1967, and I don't know if there's any further information that's desired about the scope of the project, but it is, there's a map in your packet that shows the location of the project. And again, this is a project that was one that all of the utilities need to be replaced, and the street is also at end of life.
Well, having read the information beforehand, listened to it again tonight, I would move that we approve a preliminary resolution declaring the intent to levy, which is in the notice here, all that's in there, for special assessments for permanent street surfacing, concrete curb and gutter, defective sidewalk, concrete driveway approaches, and sanitary and water surfaces from 18th Avenue South, Russell Street to West Grand.
Motion on the floor, is there a second?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
How is this gonna be financed?
Under our current ordinances,
How is that?
our special assessment ordinance that's in place.
Because here it's gonna be financed through the Public Works Construction Fund and the annual budget.
Right.
That's not special assessments.
So the Public Works Construction Fund is what pays for the project, and the special assessments help pay back the loan from the Public Works Construction Fund. The Public Works Construction Fund is the fund that the city's established and borrows for every year for the construction projects in the city.
Is it possible that a property owner gets charged twice?
Gets charged twice.
Yeah. When we establish a budget, a yearly budget, don't we include all the labor and all the overhead in the budget for the year for that employee?
No,
We don't?
we do not. No, we establish for the Public Works construction projects, the labor and overhead is included in the Public Works Construction Fund. So that staff, that crew is not part of the
Okay, and the construction fund is financed through a bond issue.
through a bond issue. And the bond issue is just the portion for the street work. There's the utilities pay directly for the underground infrastructure, including the sanitary sewer, the water main, and the stormwater utility pays for the storm sewer. So the bonding is for the surface, curb and gutter, sidewalk. And then the special assessments help recoup over time. As that bond is paid off over a 20-year period, those special assessments help,
The special assessment
is revenue.
money just goes for the payment of the bond.
Correct. Well,
No other funds go in there.
correct. The special assessment revenue is a general fund revenue, and the payment for the bond is a general fund expense. And so it's administered through the general fund, but the costs, the income from the special assessments cannot, by law, and do not exceed the cost of the project.
Okay, then how is the interest handled? Interest on the special assessment and the interest on the bond?
So the interest on the special assessment is set by the city council, and the interest on the bond is based on the sale of the bond themselves. And so there are,
Do they,
yes, that's a good question. There are a number of costs associated in administrating the special assessments that aren't assessed to the property owners. So there are the property owners are not paying for more than the cost of the project. Even the sidewalk, they're not paying for some of the underlying grading work, they're paying for the concrete. For the curb and gutter, they're not paying for the grading work in aggregate, they're just paying for the concrete. So the law requires that the city cannot assess more than the value of the asset, and the city does not. So there may be a discrepancy between the interest rate, but we can talk to Tim and get some details on that. But the amount that the city assesses is far below total costs. So staff costs, design costs, construction oversight costs, none of that is included in the assessment. It's just the physical product. And they could be, but they're not, as part of the city's ordinance.
yeah. Okay, so you're saying that the employee's yearly salary plus overheads are included in the budget? That's the way they're,
Through the Public Works Construction Fund, correct.
all right.
Well, I guess we just went through talking about finding a new way to get a special assessment.
I second that.
You wasn't?
No, I'm not going to second that.
Okay, so there was a motion on the floor by Mr. Rayone to approve approve as printed. No second. With that being said, I'll make a motion to postpone this item until we get a finalized copy of what our special assessment procedure is going to be moving forward. Because after talking about this, I don't know if these people want to be assessed or not.
Mr. Chairperson, is there a different project then that the city wants to do? I've got a, you know, we have an engineering department that I need to assign work to, and this is a very large project, and we've got most of our preliminary survey work done for the other two projects, 11th Street and 15th Street. But 18th Avenue is a major project, and if we're going to do it, we need to get started if we're going to have plans ready for construction. And if we're not going to do it, is there a different project that?
Yeah, you were gonna furnish us a list of projects that we didn't get yet. About 2 months ago, you said.
So let me pull that up.
When is this project proposed for?
Next year.
Next year. It's been in the capital improvement plan for, I think, 4 or 5 years. So for 2021, the capital improvement projects are 18th Avenue, and then we've got Cherry Street from Riverview to First Street North that we're trying to push to 2022. And we got 15th Street from Norton to Apricot, and 11th Street North from Apricot to Washington. So the 3 projects that we were looking at for 2021 were that 11th Street North, 15th Street North, and 18th Avenue South. There's also a short stretch of Jefferson Street in the industrial park from 25th Avenue North to 758 feet east, but that is simply a resurfacing project and improve some access at the very east end of that cul-de-sac. That 18th Avenue project is, and I don't have it on, this is an abbreviated.
You've got some projects that you gave us that I remember one was 95% complete, and some
Right.
were only, I think, 50% complete. So you got some work on there, on those projects to complete them.
We've got our projects this year that we're finishing design on.
Okay.
So then for 2023,
So you'll have those done by this year and construct them probably next year or the year after?
what we're looking at for next year are these
That's the street.
projects.
Yeah, okay.
We've got 9th Avenue North from High Street to Fremont. That's a Storm Street wastewater water utility project. We have Edgewood Place from Redden Road to Highway 34. That's a storm sewer, water, and wastewater and street project, a priority project. We have Fremont from 7th Avenue North to 10th Avenue North. At that time, that's a street project only. Oh, I'm sorry, no, it also includes wastewater and water. There's no storm sewer there. And we have Lion Street from 13th Avenue South to Bowles. That's a full project. So those are the projects that we had slated for 2022. 2. And that 18th Avenue project that's about 1,800 feet long. It would take a couple of these projects to replace that one.
Are some of those projects more urgent than others?
The 18th Avenue project is very urgent. It's a high priority for the water utility. And when we inspected the sanitary sewer, I wouldn't say that the sanitary sewer couldn't last a year or two there. I don't think that's an issue, but it's old and it is in need of replacement. It's in bad shape. And so that's why it's been on CIP for several years as a 2021 build.
And I think that, the issue, if it keeps coming back to the assessment part or whatever, that's gonna just be on all the projects, just about.
Right, I mean,
so
if
somehow, if we're gonna put that off for a reason, the reason is for all the other ones that there's nothing really to substitute.
Right, so
we could find something, I guess, different, but the thing is, we still gotta move forward with it.
So if there's a desire to change the special assessment process, you can take any project that you've done a preliminary resolution on, and you can note on the agenda and review and create a new preliminary resolution. So if the city wishes to utilize this police power to establish assessments, and in 3 months decides we're going to change our ordinance, and as long as the assessments that are rendered are consistent with the ordinance, there's no need to change anything. If there's a desire to eliminate assessments altogether, because the change in ordinance will affect then how the assessments are done, but you can always recall a preliminary resolution and change it, and change how you would like to assess if there's additional or reduced or whatever. I mean, the preliminary resolution just calls it out. It says we're going to assess it in accordance with the city's ordinances. If those ordinances change, then the process automatically changes.
My fear is that this is going to take quite a long time for the special assessment study. Therefore, our ordinance is going to take quite some time. So 3 months isn't going to be in the way that staff involvement. It'll go through the city engineer, and then it'll go through your office, Mr. Terry, and then Tim DeSorcy needs to have a financial review of it. Then it'll go through legal authority, through the city attorney's office, and then ultimately oversight by the mayor. And then there's a couple potential others that are listed on here. My fear is that we're not going to have time to be able to recall any special assessment preliminary resolution within 3 months or 4 months or even a year. I have a feeling that this stuff was put on here because worst case scenario, it's a case where something like this magnitude of a special assessment study, basically, long story short, where's the money going to come from? It's not going to be an easy fix, So I don't have a crystal ball, but I can go with past practice that what's going to happen is that if I or somebody else brings forth a motion or consideration for a change of a preliminary resolution to change the fees moving forward on the council floor, I'm going to get beaten down like I usually am. And it's going to say, well, we got to do this, we got to go through it, and that's it. And these people are going to be assessed this exorbitant amount just like everybody else. And we're going to keep on going through the same hoops and loops and everything else. So in theory, we can absolutely change something in practicality in the city of Wisconsin Rapids, as far as the common council is concerned, it doesn't work that way. So that's why I want to postpone this until we get this done, because if we can get this done in a very reasonable fashion, then we don't even need to change a potential preliminary resolution, because we'll just wait until that occurs, we'll pass that with what recommendations come back, and then we're good. Then we don't need to worry about a recall on any motion, so.
So here's the challenge. In order to comply with the city's ordinance, if we're gonna start design work on a project, I mean, I've got, if we don't get going on this project, it won't be designed for 2021. Right? We've got a lot of work to do. We're already behind. We'd like to have these designs done a year in advance, which is part of the reason why we've talked about staffing in the past. If we don't have a project, I gotta lay off a construction crew, park equipment, and find something else for our engineering staff to work on. You know, we've got some back burner projects that we can attack and work on, but we can't afford to get further behind on our design work.
I don't buy people getting laid off. I don't buy it. I don't buy that argument. I don't buy it.
Okay. You tell me what you want me to do with staff. If they're not going to construct a project that's going to take 3/4 of the summer to construct, what do you want me to do with them?
Well, the council has already bonded the money for them, so.
Not for 2021.
Oh, we'll cross that bridge in 2021.
So you'd really borrow money just to keep staff employed with no work to
Do we
do?
really borrow money when we owe $4 million on an aquatic center? Obviously, we're going to borrow money to keep staff employed.
If we're not going to do a project?
What if those bond issues failed the other night, didn't they?
No, and if they would have, we would have been talking about the same thing. You know, what do you want to do
Did
with the
all three of
construction?
those pass? I thought one failed.
No, they don't pass.
Well, I said it, I guess, but where we're at, to be able to get the design work and everything done, to me, we should move forward with it. And I know I know where you're coming from, that, and what you had to say about changing our time frame and getting a change in the preliminary resolution and that, but you know, to me, from Joe, is a legitimate question of what do we do with X number of people that would have a job for 3/4 of the summer? What do we do with them?
Well, what do we do after the storm?
So-
Did the guys on the
Well,
ditch crew, did they actually
that-
continue to work on the ditch crew? Or did they get pulled off and are they working on trees? They got pulled off and they're working on
Okay,
trees,
okay,
right?
But that's part of what Joe asked, what do you want to put them on? And that, we're behind on street projects now so far that will never catch up, no matter what we do. No matter how we change the assessments or how we can find different ways to pay for it, we'll never catch up on it. We're so far behind. And when you look at one is failing in areas and they're over 100 years old, at some point in time, we gotta suck it up and say, this is the way we're gonna do it. And I guess I'll suck it up and say, this is how it has to be done.
Well-
Somebody has to have something and say, this city is actually gonna keep moving, is gonna move forward.
I'm going to agree with you 100% on that we do need to do street projects. There's no question about it. There's streets in town, again, 1967. I mean, this is a case where utilities, we've got some utilities that, especially on the sewer side, that there could be catastrophic events. There hasn't been, thank God, knock on wood. But it's also a case where is this money going to come from? And we're kind of talking about this now. And again, it's like we got the cart in front of the horse. But I want to know when we're going to hire the guys that have retired. There's open positions at Public Works. When are those going to be filled?
So right now, we've got an open position that we've been advertising for months. We made an offer. and that offer was declined, so that position is open. Everything else is filled in Public Works right now. All the staff have been replaced at the street department.
From everybody that's retired in the last several years.
Yep.
Kevin Anderson,
Yep,
Johnny Rabb,
yes,
Jay Bemke.
yes.
All those have been filled.
Correct.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
The one was filled, we had a person in a supervisor role that went back to the crew. And so that person filled the shoes of one of the retirees. When that person moved up, that position was filled. Actually, that one was filled in advance. And then the only position open right now is this street supervisor position. And we've been advertising for that for months. Like I said, we had an offer out there, and today that offer was declined, so we're back to the drawing board there.
How about this?
How long will it take to finish that?
I think it's gonna take a couple months, for us to research everything and get it into a good report and get it back. It's probably 2 to 3 months. Because we still,
The assessment thing?
right, because it's not like we can have 1 or 2 people from the engineering department just drop everything and work on this. We still have our own projects that we're finishing up. Construction starts in April. I mean, we don't have staff that we can just say, look, this is what you're going to do for the next month. Because in a month, I think a person dedicated in a month probably could get this done. But we don't have a month that we can just say, look, this is your job for a month.
Well, you got Chase Street to finish, you got a block there for your sewer construction crew.
Construction work, yes.
Yeah. You didn't do any seal coating last year, or you did?
No,
So you got-
so that's maintenance work. That's a different crew. Right, the
But you
main,
can sign your sewer construction crew to a chip seal as well.
we certainly can, but a good part of the costs for that public works construction crew also comes from the utilities. So their wages are also paid by wastewater and the water utility. So if we're not doing wastewater and water projects, the general fund doesn't have the funds incorporated in it to pay for that crew. So that's one of the challenges that we have in developing the capital improvement plan, is trying to maintain a consistent level of underground infrastructure combined with surface infrastructure. Because if we decided, for example, look, we're just gonna do surface streets next year, we're not gonna do a single piece of pipe underground, that also means we don't have any revenue from the utilities to help pay for that staff. And we're not equipped for that. It's striking the balance. That's one of the challenges with having our own construction work group. There's many benefits, but that's one of the challenges, is that we try to maintain a consistent level of work that the utilities are paying for and work that the city is paying for through the general fund versus the stormwater, wastewater, and water utilities.
I guess time is of the essence. I'll rescind my motion if that's acceptable.
Yeah.
So then I'll ask you, Ms. Rayom, if you wanted to redo your motion. I'm not going to vote for it, but I'll second it, just so that it can go to the council, and then the council can decide how they want to do
Okay.
it. So,
I'll move for my original motion, that's the wording that's in number 3 on our agenda, to approve a preliminary resolution declaring the intent to level special assessments for the entire project as listed there, as I read off before.
for
I'll read it again if I need to for
no,
a brief.
I'll paraphrase for you. Preliminary resolution for 18th Avenue South from
Okay.
Russell Street to West Grand Avenue. So then, with motion on the floor, I'll second that motion. Any further discussion on this? With no further discussion, I will call for a vote.
Yeah, one of the reasons why I'm not going to second that the preliminary resolution is for replacing concrete sidewalk. There's no concrete sidewalk on 18th that I can see because I drove it.
So that includes driveway sections, right? 6-inch driveway sections is concrete sidewalk? That's,
There might be one or two.
yeah, right. If someone
Yeah.
has a driveway approach, that's,
And in the ordinance, it says that there's 2 maps that I got from your office that are used in determining whether or not sidewalk will be installed.
right.
Okay, I got those from your office.
Yep.
You know what the date is on one of them? 1975. There's a lots of changes that have been made in this community since 1975.
I
Yeah,
was
so
born yet.
I think,
And 18th Avenue is not designated as a street that should have sidewalk.
that's correct, and there's no sidewalk proposed.
Yeah.
It's just that
So-
replacement sidewalk for the driveways, there's a sidewalk section in there,
Well, I'm not.
right? I
I'm
mean,
not,
it's,
seconding that for that reason.
I know, you wouldn't do anything with sidewalks, even on driveways. That's what the ordinance calls for.
Very good. Motion on the floor is second. I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed,
Oh,
nay.
okay.
So item fails 1-2 with Kubaschak and Brzezinski voting in the negative. The item will still go to the council floor next council meeting. So with that being said, we will go to item number 4, review and consider modifying engineering department's policy for streetlights.
so the,
See it, Tim?
streetlights now are 30-foot aluminum bolt-on poles with a concrete base rather than fiberglass poles that inserted into the ground. And this allows for replacement, easy replacement if a pole is hit. You're not usually excavating and having to redo a foundation. And so this is to be consistent with Waterworks and Lighting's policy on poles, so that ours are consistent with what they're able to provide us.
Committee?
I don't have any questions.
It looks like it's just language.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll,
Okay.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I'll move that we approve the change, modify the engineering department's policy for streetlights.
Motion by Rayom, second by Brzezinski to approve modifying the engineering department's policy for streetlights as concurrent with wastewater, water and light. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes carry 3-0. We'll move on to item number 5, review and discuss the U.S. DOT year 2020 Bill Transportation Grants Program. And Mr. Mayor, this was something that you had asked to be on the agenda, so I'll let you speak on that.
Sure, thanks, and we don't need to spend a ton of time on it tonight because it's quite preliminary, but basically, we all are quite familiar with the state of transportation finance, and I know I've just listened to the special assessments discussion tonight upstairs in my office and in the previous discussions, and so we're all up to speed as the fact that there's limited resources to finance street projects all across the country and in our state and in our city, of course. I guess the reason for this particular item on the agenda is specific to 8th Street, recognizing that the infrastructure on 8th Street is well beyond its expected service life, and there's a lot of other issues beyond just the pavement surface that our community experiences every day, whether it's underground water, sewer. There's also some electric utility issues there as it relates to street lighting, and then, of course, We Energies has done some projects, actually, as of this year, that we all saw where they started to kind of cut in and deal with putting in some infrastructure, so further degradation of the ride quality on 8th Street. And it's apparent that the DOT, the Wisconsin Department of Transportation, does not have 8th Street on its radar within the 2020 to 2026 priority schedule. So it behooves us to become a little bit proactive. I mean, in some respects, I think the DOT is maybe a bit too reactive on this, and so I think at this point, it's incumbent upon us to look at what we can do to finance a potential rehabilitation or a complete reconstruction project. And I'm not saying necessarily it has to be of the entire corridor of 8th Street, but we need to put a strategy together, and it may not be the next year, but over the course of the next 5 years, right? If the DOT doesn't have a project scheduled for the next 6 years, we might be thinking 2027 or beyond, right? So I think this is an opportunity, though, that could be something more near-term within the U.S. Department of Transportation's budget. They annually put a program, it used to be called Tiger, like the animal. Now it's Build under the Trump administration. And they, in February, just released the funding opportunity for the 2020 cycle. It's a very narrow window of time, but it might be something to mobilize around creating and crafting the story and justification for a rehabilitation or a reconstruction project on 8th Street. Because the DOT is not going to program it, and actually the interesting thing is the DOT gets about $51 million to do projects in our north central region. So that's like Adams to the south of us, to the UP. And if we think of a reconstruction project on 8th Street, it's probably $25 million. So it'd be half of the entire pot of money that the region that our city sits in to finance roads, bridges. I mean, the entire infrastructure. It was just crazy that it's just not realistic to assume that the DOT under the current framework of funding in Wisconsin would ever reconstruct 8th Street until they figure out what their revenue situation is going to be. So I just propose that we have a discussion about the 2020 Build program. The neat part about this program, so while Congress has not authorized a long-term transportation financing program, they keep reauthorizing these short-term one-year deals. Well, the problem is we get notification February 18th for a May 18th or whatever deadline. So it's hard to get our ducks in a row, get our story told, and get a competitive application in order. But the unique thing with this particular funding cycle is while it's $1 billion of total funding nationally, $500 million has to go to rural communities. And I don't know how many communities like ours have shovel-ready or projects that might be ready for, or can tell a compelling story like we can on 8th Street, given the age of the infrastructure, the issues with the underground infrastructure, as well as the ride quality of the pavement. So I just put it on the table as perhaps something that we might want to consider having some further conversations with the U.S. Department of Transportation on. And we don't have an application ready. We're not going to spend any time on that until we can get committee and council's feeling on whether that's a viable thing. But the reality is the Wisconsin Department of Transportation is not going to do a single thing comprehensively on the corridor for at least the next 6 years. So we all have to live with the realities of residents' issues and business concerns and safety issues along that corridor, and I don't think we can wait that long, frankly. And so we may have to just leapfrog the state's funding system and funding model and start telling a compelling case to the federal government. And I'll get more clarification from the U.S. Department of Transportation to the extent that how ready of a project do we have to have? Do we got to have design done? The nice thing about 8th Street is there's not a lot of opportunities to change the way it's configured. We're not talking about new roundabouts. We're not talking about any of that kind of thing. It's a pretty straightforward maintenance and reconstruction project. And so anyway, I just wanted to put it on the agenda, put it on the table, and the deadline though is in May. for this funding year. I mean, not that you couldn't reapply over subsequent funding years if the city were to get its application in order. But I think the emphasis on rural is different this time than was previously.
Right.
The other quick caveat I'll mention is the program only considers projects over $1 million and under $25 million, of which this corridor project would fit right into that. So we're not competing against local street projects. We're not competing against the big art interchanges that are hundreds of millions of dollars, right? We're competing against a fairly narrow subsequent set of projects. And so I just
I'm thinking of
curious your
one.
thoughts. I'm sorry?
I said I'm thinking of one.
Yeah?
Relocate the railroad.
Well, and I don't know if I had shared that specifically with the chairman, but that was the second one as it relates to design. We might be able to apply for a design project within the railroad piece, but this would be public infrastructure, whereas railroads, as you know, are private infrastructure. So I think that's the challenge or difference there.
Yeah, so, somebody, was it Veneman that was running for Alderman that suggested putting an overpass over the railroad?
I had a lot of folks are talking about that over time, right?
Yeah, but, you know, you got, what, 4 or 5 intersections?
Yeah, an overpass or grade separation, right, as they call it.
Yeah.
That's going to be a whole different. I don't know if it's feasible. I mean, for any sum of money, right? You probably could do anything, but the reality is, yeah, relocation of the line is the right thing in the best long-term thing to do. I don't know though if this is a qualifying project. I know design might fit, but not a full relocation. Maybe next year, if we did design this year, and then, I mean, there's nothing preventing us from applying for 2 projects too. In fact, when we did our discretionary application, they encouraged us to apply for more, and most cities did apply for more, and we just applied for the 1. But that, yeah. But I guess in absence, like, what's the future of 8th Street too, in terms of, I mean, there's no way we would be able to take on a local project to address that corridor. And if the state's not going to do it, what are the options?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, when I saw this on the agenda, I looked at it and I read it a couple times, just the wording on the agenda, and I thought, what? And the first thing I guess then that went through my mind is 8th Street. And then I got this here, and I read it over, and I thought, this referral, or request actually from me, has been on there since 2016 to discuss the future of 8th Street. And I thought, that's what went through my mind, and I didn't call you up or anything. Just wondering if this would somehow could fit into something like that because of the age of it and whatnot. I understand the problems with the railroad crossing on Grand and that, but 8th Street is a project that the only way it'll get done is probably through something like this. I mean, 6 years that it's not going to happen with the state, and after that, for what the project is, the cost just keeps going up, and unless there's a total change in how the state funds projects, 8th Street's going to end up falling into the ground probably eventually, or parts of it. That's what went through my mind. This would be a possibility if we decided to go forward with it, of looking at 8th Street, because it's a thing that's been on the radar for some period of time, and it's one of those things you cross your fingers on to get, but to me it'd be something to pursue.
So I did attend informational session hosted by the federal DOT on this grant program. And it is a very accelerated, there's not much of a window for us to get something done. And the requirements for the grant are substantial. I'll be in the process of trying to look at some of the previous successful applications in Wisconsin. The city participated back in, I believe it was 2009. At that time, the Tiger Grant application, a similar accelerated schedule. With that application, it was a consortium of municipalities that participated, and
That would have been the bridge from 54.
It was.
By Port Edwards.
right, that was that Tiger One grant. Jewel and Associates performed the legwork on the grant. Fortunately, we had 2009 and a 1999 and a 2008 feasibility study in hand. So a lot of that traffic data, safety data, environmental, a lot of those things were already performed because that's required as part of the grant application. And the fee at that time was $25,000 to put the grant together. So it's not a quick and easy application. And at that time too, it was, a nationwide program, and I think it was a major interchange in the city of Milwaukee was funded in Wisconsin from it that year. The city applied in the following year for Tiger 2. That reapplication was about $5,000, if I remember the numbers correctly. We weren't successful then either, and stopped applying for those types of grants. In Wisconsin, 2 major construction projects occurred in Milwaukee. Recently, there was I think it was a county project up north of Green Bay, a major interchange. It was not a DOT-related project, as I understand it. City of Eau Claire was successful. There was it the Chippewa tribe was successful in a project up by Highway 2, I believe. And Madison had 2, I think the Eau Claire project was also a mass transit
Yeah, they're both
related
transit.
projects. And Madison's project was a design award and mass transit bus purchase, I think, were the projects. And so, the city hasn't applied since then. But this is a unique opportunity where municipalities under 200,000 qualify as rural in this, in this cycle. And so if we did want to get involved, there would be an enormous amount of work and a very abbreviated time frame to get an application in this year. Like the mayor mentioned, this is not a program that is guaranteed to come back. It has been recurring. This is the first time that they've said half of the allocations need to go to rural communities. And I think that's probably because when you look at the qualifiers for the projects, these big projects fit their criteria better than some of the smaller ones, and so the rest of the country's left out.
So 500 million divided by 50 states, just on averages, it would be 10 million per state that we would be fighting with a lot of other communities.
And to that point, we met with the DOT, we asked, are you aware of any projects that are coming from the state? Because they have to, there's a requirement that the DOT would have to endorse or support, which could mean a letter of support, it could mean a lot of things. And they were unaware of any they were certain that there weren't any regional projects in this north central region, but they were gonna check on that statewide basis. The same goes for like the congressional district, because when they looked at allocate these, it seemed like there was some intentionality around the 7 or whatever number of congressional districts in some of the old awards.
Right.
The one before reapportionment. So I think that's a valid question, like to assess whether or not this is a go or no go situation, because I'm not quite convinced this is our moment in our time, but maybe it is. But we need to get some of these questions answered to that exact point that maybe there were 25 applications that were turned out last year that are viable this year, that maybe takes us out of the running, or there's others around the state perhaps as well.
So then moving forward in terms of time is of the essence, and what I don't want to do is cut you off, Mr. Mayor. but,
No, I have everything I want to say.
What do we want to look at as a committee moving forward? Are you going to look at some stuff? Is Mr. Terry going to look at some stuff? Is this something that I want to have on the next committee agenda? Is there going to be a special committee meeting just in case? And I know that you may not necessarily have all the, but what are we looking at just moving forward, at least for the committee?
I would say within the next week, we should have some answers to the questions, just the few we threw on the table today. There's some others the DOT is going to explore. Might they be able to fully endorse something like this, recognizing that it's not on their 6-year plan, but they recognize it as a need? Some of those questions, and I think the same goes for, we need to get some answers from the federal DOT to the extent, we'll defer to their staff to tell us whether or not it's worth they know how much effort and how much time and money the applications entail. So I would suggest definitely at your next regularly scheduled meeting to at least have an update, but hold the place for maybe a special meeting, let's say to, if the staff say, well, you need your city council to start thinking about, a resolution of support, right, that the city wishes to apply for this. The trouble is pulling the application together does require a tremendous effort, and that's probably going to come externally. I don't think that I don't want to pretend that this is not a planned priority. So that would require some endorsement and some investment. I have no idea sitting here today what that might entail. So I think once we get a handle on a couple of the other successful applications for similar projects, the Brown County one that Joe mentioned is one that's sort of similar, the DOT thought. And if we get our hands on that application and to see how extensive and laborious it was, then we may want to. Nonetheless, we need to go through this motion anyway, so whether or not we spend the effort and time now, at some point in the future, we're going to need to do it anyway. And so it might behoove us just to bite the bullet, use some contingency dollars, knowing that this is a long-term priority for the city. But I don't want to assume anything heading into this conversation. I didn't even pick up the phone literally to any consultants to say, what would an application like this cost? Can you do this? I wanted to make sure the committee had the first blush at the process on it. So I would suggest maybe a special, just in case, because they're going to need 6 weeks to pull an application together, if not longer. So maybe something before the council if we need to solicit proposals or something. And that might be through finance, but that would be what I would ask for.
Sure, thank you.
And we'll get you an email update, certainly to the full council as well, as to these questions and answers. And we can ask the railroad, we can explore the railroad piece too, because CN staff, who have almost all turned over in the last year, have said they're committed to looking back at the files that you talked about where the relocation or rerouting of any line was discussed, because they have an interest in moving those trains through our community faster, and they know they can't do it where the current lines are, right? So if it's moving them westward, as it would likely be, they might have an economic interest in investing, and there would be a warranted project, a public and a private partnership perhaps to facilitate that. So I don't want to take that off the table, because I think that A Street's a different animal, and that may just be too complicated for us to explore in this cycle, but maybe there is something
That might spur some development out that way too.
Oh, I think it would. That's, I think, the message to the Trump administration, because of the opportunity zone, that federal designation of that property, census tract, really. I firmly believe that if there wasn't a barrier with access and public safety and everything else, I think some of those neighborhoods would have better investment level than they do. And we all know people that don't buy homes, on an anecdotal basis because of it. So I would add those two pieces to it.
Thank you.
I think you get answers to the questions and then see what to do.
Bring it back.
When I said, well, A Street, it's just because it's been there and it's something to look at.
Exactly. Yeah, so Mr. Mayor, whenever you get something, let me know and we can go from there then.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that being said, we'll go on to item number 6, Director of Public Works report. And I want to say that, Mr. Terry, you emailed us.
I did email them, but I did bring a printed copy in case you needed it. I do. it's all right, Mr. Chairman, I will just highlight some high points, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Some of the high points for the month of February, down at the zoo, there's a building there that has been in need of some siding, window and door replacement, so staff's been working on that. We've been out doing some tree trimming, some structural pruning, and other urban forestry type work throughout the city. The Centralia Center pool room is being painted. The Riverwalk and Lowell Center hallway is being painted at the Centralia Center. The Aquatics Center is, while construction is underway, we've been working diligently as staff on scheduling and planning and staffing levels. In engineering, along with our project and design work, we are in the process of finalizing some recommendations for degradation fees, and I anticipate making that referral for next month's Public Works meeting to review our recommendations there. Some of our street maintenance work, we did have 3 snow events that had 3 or more inches of snow, and we had 2 snow events of 3 inches or less of snow. We used 400 tons of salt and 410 yards of sand salt mix to manage those. We did pull snow from the downtown area this last month. We also removed snow from the around the churches and schools that have on-street parking. We removed snow from the West Grand Avenue, from the expressway to George Road, and from crosswalks and around fire hydrants. We also patched a number of our city streets with 2 separate crews out 5 separate occasions. We used 16 cubic yards of patch material. So we've been out doing what we can, when we can, weather dependent. We did host a lifting, rigging, fall protection, and ladder inspection training with our staff this last month. Our maintenance staff started with the rebuild of the transmission on a 32-year-old grader that we use for snow and ice control. We feel that that's a worthwhile investment. That machine, it's old, but it still gets the job done. We serviced and repaired 12 dewatering pumps and a number of our small engine equipment in preparation for the upcoming construction season. At the wastewater plant, the gas burning generator that burns waste gas from the utility was fully rebuilt and reinstalled. So we're back to normal operation and can successfully run the unit at full load, which saves 79 to 90% on the city's electric bills. We should get about 90 to 100,000 hours out of this rebuild. And we've also confirmed that the previous unit and this new unit also satisfies return on investment from the initial investment back in 2010. I mentioned a little bit earlier, we interviewed our street supervisor candidates and made an offer. At the time I typed this, the acceptance was pending. Unfortunately, that person declined, and we're back to the drawing board. We do have a change order to consider coming up for the aquatic project, and that is based on community discussions around pickleball. Instead of having 3 tennis courts, which was originally planned, there's been a request to consider some exclusive pickleball courts within the city, and we're in the process of looking at a change order to build 6 pickleball courts and 1 tennis court, essentially on the same footprint, in conjunction with that aquatics project. We aren't confident in the numbers right now, and we've asked the contractor to review them carefully, and we want to be confident that that those numbers are representative of the change before bringing it to the committee for review. We also have a change order that I anticipate bringing to Public Works next month to accommodate street parking along Apple Street. The design of the project excluded, right now, there's some angle parking along the south side of Apple Street between 8th Street and the school. And it's a little challenging with the one-way traffic to make that work. People will go past 7th and drive the wrong way to get to those parking spots. And so as part of the construction plans for the project, that parking was eliminated to try to, basically for safety. As we've reviewed, and this change order has been out there for a while, I just haven't brought it before the committee, but this change order would reinstall that parking. So I'll bring that for you all to consider at next month's meeting. There's obviously a lot more to this report, and we'll get it published, but I just wanted to touch on some of the highlights.
All right, thank you, Mr. Terry. Oh, I'm sorry, if there's any questions, go ahead.
The street supervisor, was that offered to someone in the labor force now?
So we
Or
advertised it,
or,
we advertised it within, and we didn't have any internal candidates interested.
Okay,
So we advertised it outside. We had a handful of candidates interested. Of the candidates that we interviewed, there was really only one that we were, that we felt would
qualified.
be qualified to make an offer. I am reviewing, and I've asked the HR department to review the compensation level for that position. Right now, it's really compressed. If someone works a little bit of overtime, they'll make more than their supervisor. And so we're trying to see if that's been a barrier for some of our potentially qualified staff to express interest in that position. And so I've asked the HR department to look into it. And if
We would actually have a HR director now, do we?
so, we have an interim director that's on a consulting basis.
Oh, okay.
And they have been facilitating those types of requests. And with the limited amount of time that she's here, she's pretty efficient. So it's been working out as good as it can.
President
without-
supervisor getting a little overtime.
Unfortunately, it's a salary exempt, so he's working a lot of hours. And no, there's no overtime, unfortunately. I give him credit. He's getting the job done.
Anything else for Mr. Terry? With that being said, we'll go on to item number 7, review the referral list. Interestingly enough, and I noticed this earlier, right before the meeting, that there was 2 things that didn't show up on the referral list that we had placed on the referral list, one of them being Mr. Kellogg's referral for the dotted street line in front of Assumption there, and then also Monarch encouragement in terms of the side of the hill along the expressway. So I will have those on, and then the only thing that I've got to add, I guess, is your replacement and or new sidewalk installation practices and procedures. We'll place that on there. But is there anything else that anybody has seen that we want to remove or change? Mr. Rayom, you noted A Street, and that it's got 2016 behind it, but it's becoming more and more relevant every day. The condition of A Street is exponentially getting worse, so.
Got a question for you. When you come up with these projects, how do you present those to the council and to the committee? Do you
Sure.
just make up a list and is there justification?
Yes.
Is there,
So
is the committee involved in the decision on the ground floor?
from the ground floor, as far as making suggestions for projects, I would say not generally. So generally, it's based on the surface rating of the street, the PACER rating that we
Yeah.
send into the DOT. So that's part of the evaluation, as well as the evaluation of all of the underground infrastructure. And so we review the age and condition of the water main. A lot of that input comes from the water utility, where they have a large number of breaks. They have a ranking system, they have software that they use, so that, impact is also part of it. It's not just the condition. And so we don't have a ranking system formally like that, but for example, if we have a collector or arterial that is in poor shape, in our review process, we're going to call that out and say that's going to have a higher priority than maybe a local street.
Do you do that at a certain time of the year? Do you do that, say, around the first of the year then?
So this is the time of the year that we're working on that. I just met, today's Tuesday, I guess it was last week, Thursday, with Water and Light. And our wastewater superintendent was homesick that day, but I met with our engineering department, Water and Light, and I meet with our street staff and develop all of those high priority projects, and then we try to whittle them down into projects where it tries to meet the needs of all of the the utilities.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, because we have so many street projects or streets that are over 40 years old, it's not difficult to say, well, that street needs repair.
Yeah. I guess I'd like to work with you and
Sure.
your department on this. And
Sure.
And if you had a list, maybe there's some reason why we would like to push a certain
Sure.
project.
So
Maybe there's some reason you'd like to push.
So what I'll do is we're in that process right now, and so I will. And what we're doing is we're trying to strictly categorize need on the next 3 years of projects. And it's a 5-year plan. The last 2 years are we don't spend as much time digging into the weeds on the 4th and 5th year projects. We look at the utility needs and the street needs, and oftentimes years 4 and 5 end up being components of what would have been years 1, 2, and 3, because we just don't have the capacity to do all those projects. For example, for 2021, we're looking at 18th Avenue is a big project, 11th and 15th as smaller projects, and Jefferson as just a surface project. We had 2 other projects, Smith Street and Cherry were also listed as high need projects. Both the water and wastewater are really awful. The street condition is bad, but we don't have the capacity to do those 2 projects in conjunction with our other projects. And so, as we're looking at trying to accomplish about a mile's worth in a year, those 2 projects with the underground would far exceed our capacity. And over the last couple of years, we've had some projects carry over. Last year was primarily because of a bad weather event, but we've been trying to push the staff pretty hard, and hard enough where even though we've worked as hard as we can, we haven't been able to finish up at the end of the year. And so that's helped us really evaluate realistically what we can get done, and knowing how hard the staff's been working, it paints a pretty clear picture. And so our capacity generally is just under a mile. And if, with those underground utilities, and it does depend on where within the city that it is. Obviously on the east side, it's easy digging, very predictable soil conditions, and on the west side, not so much. There's rock and sometimes heavier soils, and makes it a little more challenging. So long story short, we oftentimes have to move projects that we're anticipating within the next 3 years and push them back a little bit for both financial reasons and just our own capacity.
But as an alderman, we from time to time get complaints from our constituents.
Sure.
And my street was one of them.
Oh, yeah.
They've been complaining for
For
5 years
yes.
about
Yeah.
the paving.
Yeah,
you know?
that project's been on our capital improvement plan since, well, the first year that I started working here, and we updated the plan, so. Right.
Anything further?
Nope.
Anybody? Then I will go to item number 8, and I'll ask for a motion for adjournment.
I'll move we adjourn.
Motion by Rayom, second by Virginski to adjourn. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, ayes have it. Meeting is adjourned at 7:45 PM. Thank you.